Hello, my name is M. Jason Graham, and this is Writing. On Tuesday, we discussed the different parts of a character. A character is generally separated into two categories, that is, the reflection and the reputation. The reflection and reputation differ from audience notion in that audience notion is really the story from the audience's perspective, whereas reflection and reputation are from the perspective of the character, one, for reflection, and then two, for reputation. It is how the characters around a given character perceive him, that character's reputation. So, today what we're going to do is we're going to go through the first two categories, which are physicality, which is the physical makeup of the character, and resources. Resources being those, how the character, what the character uses to move through their day-to-day life. So, to go over them briefly, we're going to start with what you should do first. So we've got, and they're actually listed on here. So the traits of physicality are sex, age, height, weight, eyes, hair, skin, posture, defects. And this is not an exhaustive list. Remember, you can add whatever you want to each category. Things that are relevant, generally. Height, weight, age, sex, those are pretty general traits that you would think about for any character. As far as eyes are concerned, for me, I added eyes because there's a lot that you can tell about a person by looking at their eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul. And you can try this exercise too. If you have a photograph of someone, block out their forehead and their nose and mouth and look at their eyes, and you should be able to tell what is actually going on with them the moment that picture was taken. When I give a description of eyes, I like to give a description that shows something about the character. So for instance, I have cinnamon brown eyes, or I have a lazy eye. One of my eyes is a little bit more closed than the other one. And that could be due to a number of things, but it's something that adds character for the story, which is the second thing that I would like to say. You can describe the traits however you would like. But the idea is that the more description you give that is less about what the story is about, the more distracting that description is. This isn't about necessarily the character fitting the image that you want it to fit. This is about what is the best character in order to be able to tell this story. So if you have an act, for instance, there's an actor that inspires you, like Michael B. Jordan, or Zoe Saldana, or Kate Hudson, whoever it is, you can keep that person in mind as far as what that role is, because that inspires you, and you should pull inspiration from anywhere. But from a business standpoint, unless you're actually producing the film, like an executive producer, and you can afford those people, you shouldn't have your heart set on that person playing that role. So, then we go to resources. Resources we have, let's go back to physicality. So skin. Skin is the same way with the eyes. For me in general, I tend to write African characters from the African diaspora. So my descriptions are of brown people. So I use all different kinds of brown descriptions that come to mind for me. Posture. Posture is very important. It can give a sense of health. It can give a sense of age. It's just it's a good trait. And then defects. Defects are anything that is out of the ordinary, that stands out about the character, that doesn't fit into the other categories. So if you have a character that's an alien and the alien has purple eyes, for instance, that you would still put that description in the eyes description. But if the character is, for instance, deaf, that is something that would go into the defects. If the character has a third leg, that is something that would go into defects. So any defects is basically anything that stands out about the character having to do with the story physically, that fits into that can't be described in any of the other traits. You can add more traits. You could add race if you wanted to. Like I said, I typically write characters from the African diaspora, so the description is good enough for me on this worksheet that I've created. Resources. Social class. So social strata, which is your basic, for those of you who have taken basic sociology, I like to use a double strata. So along with upper, middle, and lower class, I like to say like upper middle or lower middle class, like use two of them to kind of describe where they are, because you will be creating multiple characters for this story. So you'll be doing this multiple times, and you'll need to know the difference. Also, I include national citizenship. So unless the character is in a story that's taking place and is staying in the same country that the story is residing in, I add national citizenship because that's something that needs to be known about the character. If the character is an immigrant and they're a naturalized citizen, or if they're an immigrant and they're here illegally, quote unquote, they're undocumented, those are things that impact how that character moves through life. And so it impacts what that character does and how they respond to things. Occupation, of course, has to do with the means of earning a living, which doesn't necessarily have to be money. If it's a period piece, it could be trading, supplies, time, that kind of thing. Workday. So the amount of time that it takes to do a day's work, enough to live, also plays into who the character is. If they're a day laborer in any century, generally their time is spent 12 to 16 hours a day working. So that means that there's not a lot of time to do anything else, including sleep, which you begin to paint a picture of who that character is with that information. Education. So education is not just about formal training or going to college or going to school. It's also self-study and practice on your own. Typically, if somebody has not gone to school but has studied the subject for years, I say what their college degree equivalency is. So I would say has a BA equivalent in science or biology. That's how I describe that. Just so there's a standard. The next one is country of origin. Also, it's the same thing as national citizenship. If the story takes place wholly in a country and the character was born in that country, you don't necessarily need to go into this. However, if the story is taking place with multiple characters across the world, for instance, like Transformers, or for Lord of the Rings, then this information is helpful because each culture behaves differently, has a different set of norms. Rearing. This is probably the biggest one, or the one that takes the most room up on the sheet, because you have to talk about what resources that character had as a child. So you get into the relationship with their mother and father, what their mother and father did, and how that impacted them, anything that's relevant that impacted that character. Marital status. So not only is there single, married, divorced, those kinds of relationships, there's a wide spectrum. You only need to concern yourself with what is necessary for the story. So if you have somebody who's in an LTR, which is a long-term relationship, you can list it as that. If you have somebody who the character is having casual sex with, you can list it as that. If the character is in a complicated relationship with someone, I would suggest that you describe that, because if it's impacting the story, one, is probably a love story, and two, you're going to need to be very specific about how that character interacts with that particular foil. Second to last is religion, of course, which is the same thing as marital status. You just don't want to say that they're a Christian. You want to say how they feel about it and what kind of Christian they are. So don't just say they're a Christian. Say that they're a Protestant, or they were raised Protestant and they're a practicing Catholic now. They're raised Muslim, but they're Buddhist now. You want to be specific about those things. Hobbies. A lot of people think that this is something that, oh, well, he or she just does this for fun. That's not what hobby is listed on here. Hobby is listed on here as something that gives insight into how the character thinks or behaves. So if they're playing chess as a hobby, then you have a scene with them playing chess. It tells the audience that they're a person that thinks about strategy. So no fair putting things on the character sheet that aren't relevant to the story that you're telling. So, as a way of helping you understand that, I am going to go through the character that I have created for the identity story that we've been talking about actually for the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to erase this side. So, to begin, the first thing that you want to write on your character creation sheet at the very top are what? Your guiding principles. A little bit more space over here. So, why? Well, because your protagonist, which is what we're working on, is supposed to be a representation of your argument, which is your guiding principles. And so guiding principles are theme, purpose, expectation, and log line. Remember that your guiding principles are your compass. So if there's something about your character that doesn't fit into these four things, then you need to change the character, or you need to change one of these four things so that it fits. Let's take a look at my character. Now, of course, I haven't given him a name yet. Well, I have given him a name, but it's tentative. And like I said, you want to stay away from naming things too soon because there's really not a need for it. So, my man's, remember he's an actor, and so he's a former child actor that has had a difficult time transitioning into acting as an adult. So, since it's a he, his sex is male. His age, I don't know why I did that. 35. Now I would encourage you to pick a number, but you could put mid or late 30s. That's fine. That's probably something you want to save for the casting director. Let them concern themselves with it. You pick a specific age. Height. So he's going to be average height for an African American male in Hollywood, which is 5'10". And weight, he's going to be 160 with a medium build. So not only do you want to put in his weight, but you want to put in how he looks to give a clear picture of that. Eyes. So what I put down for his eyes were sleepy brown. And let me fix this real quick. So sleepy brown eyes. Now, does that mean that he's tired? Does that mean that he smokes a lot of marijuana? We don't know yet. But I've selected sleepy brown eye, and he does smoke a great deal of marijuana, actually. Hair. So his hair, he's 35. He's balding, so he just cuts all his hair off. So we're going to put shaved, bald. Skin. Again, I write a lot of African American characters, so I don't have race on here. Or a lot of characters in the African diaspora, so I don't have race on here. But my descriptions are very, what would be termed ethnic. So I described him as paper bag brown. For those of you who don't know the history behind that, I won't get into it on here, but anyone who's familiar with African American culture in pretty much since after slavery, Reconstruction, will understand the paper bag brown reference. So the paper brown bag is the paper bags that they used to have at the grocery stores that they would pack in groceries in. So he's that complexion. Posture. His posture is relaxed, but forward, which means he likes to lean into people. When he's talking to people, he likes to engage with them and really get their attention. Defects. None. So he doesn't have any telling scars or anything like that, at least not right now. I don't see a reason for it in the story. So I'm going to let you take a look at this so that you can see it real quick. I'm going to pull myself out of the way. And I'll talk from behind the camera. Okay. So that is what the physicality section of a character creation sheet looks like. as I said, you can add any traits that you would like to that. Already at 20 minutes. So now that you've gotten a chance to see that, let's move into resources. In fact, let's do resources as a separate video. So I'm gonna come back and do resources as a separate video. Of course, if you have any questions, you can go to mjgstorycreation.com. I think this weekend what I'll do is I'll actually post a copy of a pivotal character worksheet, that's what I call it, so that you can have access to that, so that you can see what the entire sheet looks like. I'll be back in a moment. Take care.